Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the e-commerce growth map podcast with Lion Media. And in today's podcast episode, we're going to discuss Black Friday, right? So we're recording this podcast was today, Saturday. So we're essentially going to talk about how Black Friday was for some of our clients, right? And so essentially what I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to jump into specific sales number. Obviously, this is kind of private numbers, but some of our clients are allowing us to display these numbers because I think some of these clients were like very successful in Black Friday. And so we're going to discuss like the strategy that helped us get to these revenue numbers. So like we're going to dive into Meta account, we're going to dive into Google account, we're going to look at the Shopify numbers, right? And then we're going to talk a little bit about email marketing as well. And then proceeding that, we're going to talk about what we're doing for Cyber Monday, which is literally a couple days ahead, right? So the purpose of this video is just to encourage you and to prep you, depending when you're watching this video, right? So we're going to try to get this as soon as possible, obviously before Cyber Monday hits. So that's the goal. So maybe even just like the preceding day. So let's jump straight into it, right? So Black Friday. I think some people did really well on Black Friday. Some people did poorly on Black Friday. And we're going to talk about the reason why some brands perform poorly on Black Friday, because we do have some clients that didn't perform as well as we wanted to. So like we didn't hit revenue projection, we didn't hit spend projection, right? And so we can also talk about that in this podcast episode, right? So first things first, I'm sharing my screen right now. So what we can actually see here. So what we can see here over here, so this specific client of ours, so they're a relatively big brand, right? So again, I'm not sure kind of where you're coming from with your business, but this brand is relatively big. So this month made $405,000 in gross sales. Total sales was $325,000 in total sales, right? So to some people, like that's like, oh my God, those are like dream numbers for them, right? To some clients, it's like, oh, like, yeah, we've done that a couple of years ago, but like for this client, like this is pretty big for them. Like when you look at the overall growth percentage, so this is when you look at the total sales, so like this is 61% above from what we did last month, right? Obviously, again, this month, which is November, is it's like that's when Black Friday is, so it's kind of expected to be hitting this kind of this relative like these revenue numbers, right? So when you look at the actual day of Black Friday, which was yesterday, looking at this, right, you see that we hit $28,993.11 in total sales, right? So this is already subtracting all the discounts. So $28,993 in total sales. So if you're watching this on YouTube, obviously this is great. You can see this, but like if you're listening to this on like a podcast, which is like Spotify or Apple Podcasts, obviously you're just gonna be you're not gonna get as visual of an experience than if you were actually watching this. So like I'm gonna try to be as descriptive as possible when describing this. And if you're listening to this on audio. So again, in the whole month of November, so this is looking from the 1st to the 29th, they hit $405,723 in gross sales, right? And then we break it down to total sales, so that's $324,130.07, right? So that's how much total sales was we hit this month. And the biggest day of that was actually yesterday, which was Friday, Black Friday, which they hit $28,993.11, right? So again, for them, this is like pretty good. Now, the next question is, okay, like what's the strategy behind hitting these numbers? Like what's the Meta strategy? What's the Google strategy? What's the email strategy as well? We're also advertising on other platforms as well, but like but those platforms don't drive as much revenue. It's like Meta and Google account, right? So let's break this down a little further. So we're going to dive into the Meta account first, specifically what we did. Overall strategy was for Meta, right? So so the plan was we had an early Black Friday sale going on for the specific brand. So that started, I believe, was on the 12th. So we had an early Black Friday sale that went from the 12th all the way up until the 26th. Yes. And then on the 26th, we switched it over to the actual Black Friday sale. So the discount code was, the sale was, we went 30% early sales, and then on Black Friday, we went 40%. So which again started on the 26th, 40%. And this is gonna go all the way up until, I believe, the 3rd. It's when we have this sale running up until. So the Cyber Monday sale is also gonna include the 40% off for this specific client. So you can see, initially we budgeted for $25,000 on Meta from an advertising budget perspective, right? And initially seeing this plan, I'm like, okay, I think we can definitely push past the spend while maintaining a relatively good efficiency number or ROAS number, right? And so that's exactly what we did. And so when you look at, so this data over here, this is looking at month to date, November 1st to November 29th, you can see that we hit $25,326, right? So this includes some data from today, right? And when you look at the efficiency, it's a 4.60 return on ad spend. So a 460% return on ad spend, which is like very good for this brand, right? This is again very good for this brand. If you kind of think about it, like their break even is like it's a 3x, right? So like anything about them is just like straight profits, right? And so when you look at the total revenue from this specific brand, from this specific account, it's $116,553.53, right? Again, so that's very good. So what led to all this revenue? Like, what's the account structure? What's the breakdown, right? We won't dive specific to like what the specific brand is selling, because then obviously that reveals a little bit too much information about the brand. So we're trying to keep this as discreet as possible. So when you look at the overall structure that we have, so when you look at the campaigns over here, so we have a total of 5 campaigns, right? Now, last month we had multiple campaigns running, but what we're essentially trying to do across all our accounts now is just to like simplify the account structure. So not to have as many campaigns. So essentially what we do now is like we have campaigns and then we have multiple ad sets in those campaigns, right? And I'll show you a few of those here in just a moment. So you can see over here, so we have a campaign specifically for Black Friday, and this started actually on the 13th. So November 13th of 2025, that's when this campaign started, right? And you can see what we spent so far. And what we spent in our account on this specific campaign was $4,920, right? And then when you look at the actual revenue and efficiency in that, so the ROAS is a 3.21 return on ad spend. Okay, this is good, right? So this is still above the break-even point. And then when you look at the actual revenue from that, it's $15,804.82, right? So that's the actual revenue from this specific campaign, right? And so this is the same campaign where we launched the early Black Friday sale, right? And so essentially what we did, we had an ad sets for the Black Friday sale, right? So I'll show you what that looks like. So we had one ad set when we launched this campaign, and that ad set specifically was for the early Black Friday sale. So it had the early Black Friday sale messaging. It had early Black Friday sales creative as well, right? And then on the creative, it had like a big display in bold text, early Black Friday sales, and then it had 30% off, and then it had the code on that, right? So you can see right now, you can see the two actual like ad sets. Let me move this. You can see the 2 ad sets over here. So the broad early Black Friday sale, so you can see the data for that one. So how much did we spend on that? We spent essentially $1,968 on that specific campaign. We can see the total number of sales that was received from that. So 65 purchase at a 4.15x return on ad spend, $8,161.35 from that specific ad set, right? Now, this ad set ran for a couple of weeks, right? So it ran from the 13th all the way to the 26th, right? And then on the 26th, we turned on this campaign and we essentially like throttled this with spend, right? So I think yesterday we budgeted for like $2,500 on this specific campaign itself. So you can see that we spent a total of $2,951 in this specific campaign. So unfortunately, we didn't hit the spend target that we want, right? So essentially that just kind of tells us that there wasn't enough inventory, right? There wasn't enough demand to get the ROAS target that we want at the spend level that we were spending, if that makes sense. So essentially that's the data for that. So we had 72 purchases at a 2.52 return on ad spend. So a total of $7,965 in revenue from this specific campaign, right? So you can see, obviously, again, this one is off and this one is on right now. It's going to run up until the 3rd, right? So obviously the goal is for this campaign to be a little bit more efficient because we didn't hit our spend target yesterday. So we want to continue to push this, right? So currently right now we're spending $1,000 a day on this specific campaign. So let me go back to the campaign level. So you can see that how much is budgeted for this one. We have $1,000 budgeted just for today, which is the November 29th. And then we'll see how sales goes tomorrow to see if we need to push more spend or to see if we need to reduce the spend on this one. But yesterday, again, the total target we had yesterday was $2,500. So let's actually look at the sale data from yesterday. So yesterday, it looks like we spent $1,600 out of the $2,500 budget that we had for this campaign. So we came shy of what the actual spend target was. And then we can see that 2.82 return on ad spend, 44 purchases, right? So obviously this was yesterday specifically, this was our most successful campaign with the most purchases, with the most sales, and with essentially the most revenue. And then preceding that one, essentially, and so from an efficiency perspective, so our remarketing campaign, This is DPA, so this is dynamic remarketing. So that one had an 11.2, essentially 11.50 return on ad spend, 21 purchases, $3,000 in revenue. And then the preceding that, from an efficiency standpoint, we had our Dabba campaign, which had a 7.93 return on ad spend and 15 purchases and $1,500 in revenue, right? So again, I think overall we did it pretty good. We had a pretty good Black Friday. So overall spend yesterday was $2,934.06 across all the different campaigns that we were running, right? Now, so essentially, a lot of these are evergreen campaigns. So what we did essentially was we duplicated those. For example, for the Dabba campaign, we duplicated the ad, right? And then we just changed the messaging to show the Black Friday sale, right? And the same thing for the DPA campaign. This is dynamic product ad. We duplicated the ad, the catalog, and then we just changed the messaging. That's it. Everything else is the same. We just changed the messaging on that one. So let me show you essentially what that looks like. So we'll start with the Dabble campaign. So when you go to the Dabble campaign, when you actually look at the ads that we have running, and again for Dabble, this is a dynamic ad for a broad audience essentially. So let's look at that. So we see over here, we have, this is broad. And then when you get into the actual ad itself, we have our evergreen campaign, which should be paused. And then our Black Friday ad, which should be on. So this is what that looks like. So we have right here, one second, let me pull that. So yeah, so essentially right now we have this specific, let's look at the last 7 days actually first. So we can see some data, which one was actually the one that was our evergreen one. And we'll know that because it has some evergreen, it should have some data behind that. This month. Okay, so this one over here, this is our evergreen one, right? And then we have this specific, this is focused on a specific, and again, if you're listening to this on audio, we're looking at another ad right now. So essentially we have 2 ad running. One of the ads is a Black Friday ad specifically, and then the other one is just like a specific collection that was not included within the sale. So that's why that's separate. So the messaging on that one is going to be separate because this one was like a premium collection that was not supposed to be on sale. So that's why we have this in a separate ad. But nonetheless, the thing that I want you guys to essentially get from this is that what we did was we duplicate the ad. So you see, as we're looking at month today. So earlier during the month, we had our evergreen campaign running. The evergreen ad running. Right, and so you look at the spend from that, it was like $769, right? And then we paused that, and then we turned on our ad for essentially the early Black Friday sales. And with that one, we essentially just changed, like when that deadline came, we essentially just changed the copy to display the Black Friday. So that's essentially what we did for this, and the same thing for the dynamic product ad again. So essentially, that was the overarching strategy that we had for Meta. We just went in and changed all our campaign, the ads and the messaging to display Black Friday. Now, in some cases, some brands may not have necessarily changed the copy because it's Black Friday. So people are expecting brands to display sales. So you may have a look at some brands may not have turned off their evergreen campaign, right? And we actually did that for from some of our other accounts. We didn't turn off the evergreen campaign, but still perform well because people are expecting sales. So they're going to click on the ad nonetheless and then see the sale on the website, which that should be displayed on the website, and they can go and purchase the sale on that specific campaign. Right? Again, guys, so we have 5 campaigns. One of them was focused on Black Friday. Like we had Black Friday copy, we had Black Friday creative, right? With bold text. And then another one was just like a mixed collection with different products that we offer. And then we had 2 remarketing campaign. One of them is just a standard retargeting campaign, and the other one is a dynamic retargeting campaign. And then the other one is a Dabba campaign, right? Which is just catalog again, but just for prospecting. So that was our account setup for this, essentially for this whole entire month. And we're gonna keep this going into Cyber Monday. So the next thing that we're gonna do for Cyber Monday, and we're gonna start this tomorrow actually, we're gonna change the copy. The sale is gonna remain the same. We're just gonna change the copy to display Cyber Monday. So we're gonna go back in here in our main Black Friday sale campaign, and we're just gonna change the creative we're just gonna change the creative and the copy to display Cyber Monday, and the sale is gonna remain the same, right? So that's the strategy that we did for Meta. Now let's take a peek at Google real quick. Google, very similar strategy, right? Except that what you'll see here, so let me go back to the campaign level. So we're looking at November 1st to November 29th. So click on campaign. Okay, so we have that over here. So you see that we have multiple campaigns over here, right? We're not gonna go into the specific creative again, just to kind of keep this as discreet as possible. So strategy, as you guys can see over here, we do have a Black Friday sale campaign, right? Let's look at the data for that. So very similar strategy that we did for the Meta one. So we have this PMAX campaign, which is Performance Max on Google. And then within the Performance Max campaign, we have two ad sets. One ad set is going to have the early Black Friday sale. And then the other ad set is going to have the actual Black Friday sale. Yesterday, where we essentially budgeted for $1,500 just in the specific campaign. We can see that month today, we spent $4,557. And then we can just we'll look at the specific Black Friday sale day. We'll look at the data for that. But you can see that we look at the ROAS by time metrics. So we can see we have a 349% return on ad spend on that Black Friday campaign. And then we can see as well, in terms of like the revenue for that, we generated $16,000 from that campaign this whole entire month, right? Now, let's break it down specifically to what happened yesterday. So I'm gonna move this over here. Look at yesterday. And then we can see yesterday, again, we didn't actually spend as much as we wanted to. So we can see that we spent $2,400 essentially, and then we generated $9,000 from that, 64 purchases, right? So essentially kind of what happens sometimes, like there's not enough demand to get through the total spend that we have, or the projected spend. There's not enough demand for that, right? And so Google just won't spend your capital like that if it doesn't think that it can spend that capital at the ROAS target that you set on the specific campaign. And you can see the ROAS target that we set on all those campaigns over here, right? So minimum, as you can see, it's a 300% because that's the minimum that we need to break even for this specific account. On some of them, we brought it down to 250% because we saw it wasn't really spending this much. So sometimes we'll go below what the break even ROAS is on that. But everything else is 300%. And when it's performed like actually really good, then we bump it up to like a 500%. Right, but the one that you see 500%, those are branded campaigns, because branded campaigns should be like, they should have an expectation of an efficiency that is significantly higher than your original acquisition campaign, right? And so that's what we set a 500% return on ad spend on that. Again, so this is the data for that. Now, the thing that is kind of different from this one that matters, like we didn't change the copy for other campaigns except for the Black Friday Cyber Monday campaign that we initially have. We left the copy as it is. The only thing that we had running was the promotion. We had a promotion extension, right? And then we also had like a site links and call outs as well. All of those had specific Black Friday messaging on with the specific sale that we were running. That's about it. But everything else remained the same. And just to add on top of that, the search campaign, which is brand search, we did duplicate the initial ad that we had. And then for the one that we duplicated, we just adjusted it slightly to mention the Black Friday sale in addition to what the discount and the code is for that. So that's essentially the changes that we made on the Google, specifically the search and like the PMAX campaign as well. So looking at this month right now, so the goal is to push to $35,000 in total spend, right? So we have about like 2 days left in the specific month. So we still have like $3,000 to get through. And we want to be able to spend that at above a 5x return on ad spend. And what we look at the ROAS by time, and month to date, it's at a 563% return on ad spend. And so we can honestly, we can spend as much as we need to as long as we're above a 500% return on ad spend, because that's just more profit for the client, right? Awesome. So that's essentially how we perform and how we generated what you see over here on Shopify. That's how we generated $28,000 in overall, in $28,993 in sales. Now, a small portion of that also came from AdRoll. We do some remarketing ads on AdRoll. So, and we don't spend a lot. It's like $5,000 a month. And yesterday we also really didn't spend significant amount on that. And then the other part of the revenue is coming also from email. Email, this client has a pretty significant list. I think yesterday we generated around like $5,000 to $6,000 overall on the email, right? So that's just like a small percentage of what the actual revenue that we generated yesterday, right? So it's the overarching plan was we had our Google Ads campaigns primed and ready. We had our Meta ad campaigns primed and ready. And then we've been sending emails every single day since the 12th, just pushing sale aggressively, right? We're sending emails campaign every single day, and then we're sending at least 2 text messages a week, right? And you don't want to be too aggressive on a text message because some people kind of get overwhelmed with text messages. So you don't want to kind of ruin your reputation with your customers. So we can't be as aggressive on that because there's still, you still want to kind of protect that person's privacy and not, be bombarding them with messages. But on email, specifically for this time period, it's okay to do that, right? People are expecting that because people have already been conditioned to receive so many emails, right? And it's actually to your advantage to be pushing messages every single day because there's going to be so much noise during the specific time, and you want to make sure that among all the noise, you want to be like one of the loudest people, right? For your specific customers, right, guys? That's essentially kind of what we've done leading up to Black Friday and how we actually executed that, right? And really the biggest change that's going to happen between now and tomorrow is we're just going to change our overall copies. We're going to change some creative as well to represent Cyber Monday, right? And historically, what we've seen that tends to perform better when you change the actual messaging because people again are expecting Cyber Monday to be an actual big thing again. So you don't necessarily want to be displaying Black Friday sale because Black Friday thing is kind of over. Now you want to be pushing a different message, right? That is associated with the event or with the season or with the sale period that we're in right now. So changing creative and changing ad copy is the next thing that we're going to do. The next task for us as something I'm working on right now, and then we'll record another podcast episode, is essentially show you guys how we do projections, how we project our media dollars for the month of December, right? So we'll essentially break down how essentially we distribute our budget across the different platforms, so whether that's Meta and that's Google, right? And how we determine which they are going to get more spend or less spend, and how we essentially determine the ROAS, the ROAS expectation of those specific campaigns on those specific accounts. So that's kind of the next thing that we're going to be working on. And so stay tuned for that for the next podcast episode. Guys, signing out. If you guys have any question, please leave them down. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave them down in the comments below. And if you're watching this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can go visit our website at lionmediaad.com, or you can follow us at lionmediaad on Meta, and the same thing as well as on Instagram, right? So you can go follow us over there, and you guys can drop us an email, or you can email info@lionmediallc.com, and then we'll get back to you. Signing out. See you guys in the next episode.